Straw Hut Media.
Hello on the Rockers. Today we celebrate the actor's life with actor, writer, poet, singer, songwriter, and mentor, the man with so much talent he needs 3 names, John Clarence Stewart. You know him from P-Valley, Zoey's Extraordinary Playlist, Marvel's Luke Cage, and now on stage in Jelly's Last Jam. You get all of that and me, your favorite host with the sassy most. Raise a glass, let the drinks begin. It's On the Rocks.
Life is a banquet, and most poor suckers are starving to death.
I'd like to propose a toast.
This is On the Rocks with Alexander, where I drink with your favorite celebrities as we talk about fashion, entertainment, pop culture, reality TV, and, well, that's about it. So pop a cork, lean back, and raise a glass to On the Rocks.
Fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Lord have mercy, buttons and bows and pantyhose. On the Rocks podcast, the place where we're too glam to give a damn. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at On the Rocks on Air and on Facebook, On the Rocks Radio Show. Send me an email, book me for a pride, wedding, funeral, quinceañera, Brits. I don't care, I'll show up. Info at ontherocksradioshow.com. Send us your comments, guest requests, and guest questions. The show's presented by Straw Hut Media. You can watch now our over 350 episodes for free at ontherocksradioshow.com. You can watch us on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire TV on the Outlet.tv app, Facebook Watch, streaming with pride on SVTV, and on Channel 31 on the East Coast. Hello, East Coast. We proudly tape at UBN Go Studios, your one-stop place for podcasting. All right, let's get the show on the road. The man of the hour, John Clarence Stewart, an entertainment renaissance man, as a poet, singer-songwriter, actor, hot off the heels of a tour-de-force performance as Big Teak in Season 2 of P-Valley. You also know him as Simon on NBC's musical series Zoey's Extraordinary Playlist. Other TV credits include Marvel's Luke Cage, Gotham, Blue Bloods, The Good Fight, and his theater credits include projects at the Manhattan Theater Club, the Classical Theater of Harlem, and Libra Theater in New York. Regionally, he's appeared at the Alliance Theater, Actors Theater of Louisville, and the Aurora Theater. And if you're in Southern California, you are in for a show. He is currently starring in the title role in Jelly's Last Jam. It's the bittersweet story of Jelly Roll Morton, one of the leaders in bringing jazz to American culture. The musical also serves as a social commentary on the Black experience during that era, and during today's era, we're going to talk about that. The show is currently running at the historic Pasadena Playhouse until June 23rd. Let's take a little peek.
And it came to pass that a people were born, been torn from the land that was their home. The story of their pain was set forth in music, destined to conquer, take the world by storm. And it came to pass that a messenger was called. In telling the story of Jelly, the story of jazz, you gotta have grit to go with the gravy.
Only 4 weeks to see it. Please welcome John Clarence Stewart. Well, and I know, I'm being big and loud, but you have to, save your voice because you have a show tonight, and you guys opened last weekend. I want to talk about growing up. Music has always been part of your life. What was your first kind of exposure to music, or what was that album or artist or whatever that sparked your passion in music?
I think the person who was the big exposure for me was probably my mom. My dad was a pastor, and my mom led worship in the church. And so we would hear her singing worship songs and all of that all the time. And that would be she was the first really big influence that way. And then after that, I wasn't singing myself for a very long time growing up. I thought I was going to do sports or something like that. But when I was in my junior year in high school, I had a friend named Chris who was in a math class with me, and he was going to a theater class, and I didn't have anything to do after school. So I followed him there, and there's a teacher, her name is Coop, and she just went down the line of all the students, and they were doing an audition for a musical. And so she went down the line, and she got to me, and she asked me if I sang, and I said no, and then she kept moving. And then she came back down the line because she was doing, I guess that's the initial, and then the callback was coming back down the line. And she was coming back down the line, and she was like, "You sure you don't sing?" I was like, "No, I don't." And she asked me if I sang Happy Birthday. And I was like, well, everyone knows Happy Birthday. And so I sang Happy Birthday, and then she put me in the musical.
Well, I read that somewhere, so I wanted to say, is that a true story?
That is a true story. That is a true story. Coop, I owe Coop everything.
What? The show was Once on This Island, yes?
Yeah, and I played Papa Gay in Once on This Island. And that was I think that was the first time it was the first time I sang out loud in front of people
Wow.
ever. And it was the first time I did a musical, and it was really shot out of a cannon because I'd never done anything like that before. But there was this experience that I had. There was one of the choir teacher who was doing the vocals, who was teaching us the music in that show. She was so affirming, just so affirming to me and my voice. And yet still, after that was over, when I went to college, I would never say that I was a singer because I know, for me, I know singers who sang, you know what I'm saying, who like sing down boots, like all this, like they are fucking fire. And I was like, man, I can't say that I'm a singer if I don't do that. And it took me a long time to accept and embrace my voice and my way of interpreting song. And that was through a teacher named Oral Moses at a university of mine who encouraged me to record myself singing. He said, if you can't fall in love with your voice, how can you expect anyone else to fall in love with your voice? You have to really listen to yourself and choose to find the good in your voice. And so I just went through that process, and it's yeah. So that's the beginning. Yeah.
It's so weird to me to think of you, squeaking out "Happy Birthday," not really having sung out before, and look where your career and music has taken you, and what a big part singing is of your life.
You are absolutely right. I am floored. I'm floored. I could not have predicted this outcome in my life. And matter of fact, I ran from it. I just wanted, for the longest time, I was like, I'm an actor. I want to be known as an actor. I don't want to be known as a singer. I want to be known as an actor. I just want to do, gritty roles and all this other stuff. And what's ended up happening is roles and projects and stories that incorporate music have been the things that have really pushed my career forward in the most powerful ways. And they've also, a lot of the projects like Zoey's and even Jelly's, I'm not right for everything, right? My voice isn't right for everything, but when it's right, it's right. And that's that kind of self-acceptance that that I've grown into as I've become more of an adult. Yeah.
I want to talk about the duality you had as a youth. You mentioned sports. I know you had a scholarship in football. And you talked in one of your interviews that you kind of gave up playing the trumpet because it wasn't masculine enough. And how we are raised with a certain ideal that's put on us. This is what boys do. And I'm sure you can speak from the Black experience as well. This is what a Black man is supposed to grow into. Talk about that duality of being a jock, quote unquote jock, but then having this music. I mean, you also studied piano for a little bit.
Yeah, I think that I've always had this interesting relationship with masculinity. And I think we all do in our own ways as men or male identifying people. Like, we have the question is, do I fit? Do I fit in it? Does that language encapsulate me? And a lot of times, as opposed to saying bringing that to me and saying, because I am like, whatever that is, because I am that period. A lot of times what I ended up doing is trying to cut away parts of myself to try to fit an idea. And that was part of the trumpet. When I was in school and I was playing football or basketball or what have you, I was looking for affirmation, validation. I was looking for these markers of like power and prowess and being affirmed by the men in my life. And my dad was an incredible football player growing up. And so I just wanted to, a lot of it was just, my dad to be proud of me.
No.
And I wanted him to be proud of me, and I wanted to be a contender in certain spaces. I've never, in a lot of ways, there was a kind of a machismo that I haven't really had in my life. It's just, but I learned how to adopt this idea of that for myself. And the interesting thing was when I was playing music, like trumpet, piano, there was this softness that would come out. There was this other side of me that would come out, and a more either introspective, it was a different kind of power, but I didn't know what that was.
Mhm.
And it didn't feel like that power was welcome inside of this idea of masculinity. And so I let those things go. And also part of this journey musically, because I think for me, music is also it's power, but it softens. It like it's very much like water. Like it, it can
Mhm.
it is, sometimes a song is like a cool drink of water. Sometimes it's a flood, right? But either way, like music has that effect in my life. So, and that's something that's something that's very important to me as well. The the dissection and the interrogation of masculinity in the world. And in my own life. There's actually a book by Bell Hooks that came out years and years ago called The Will to Change. And it was the thesis of the book really was about uh, interrogating manhood
Mhm.
and the idea of manhood and what makes a man. And that's also, to be frank, that's also why I decided to be an actor. Because in my personal life, there didn't seem to be enough space for me. Um, and in characters, I would find these other like a lot of parts of me that weren't safe in the world were safe in characters because inside of this fictional world, I could express joy in a way that I couldn't in the actual world, or sorrow in a way that I couldn't in the actual world, or sadness, or love in a way that I couldn't in the actual world. And then the process has been when I access that part of my instrument in fiction, how do I then have the courage to bring that, what I've learned, into my own life? And yeah,
I absolutely love that. And talking about masculinity and identity, it's Pride Month. We're celebrating Pride Month, and we all share our coming out stories. So I want to know from you, what was your coming out story like, coming out straight in theater and musical theater?
well,
That must have been a shock.
no, it was definitely a shock, and I think it continues to shock.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that I found I found well to be to be candid, I because I grew up very, 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 very staunchly religious, and the beliefs and the views that I had in the world um towards the queer community were like they were they were abominable. Um and they were so rooted in fear and so rooted in dogma. And it was, I mean, honestly, through doing it was through doing a scene in an acting class in my first school. And it was a Tennessee Williams one act. I don't remember the name of it, but it was two men who were working on it. And I just want to be a good actor. I'm trying to dig into the character and find the scene. And I'm just not getting it. It's not clicking. And my teacher asked me, she proposes the question of whether or not the relationship is more than I think it is between these two men in the scene. And I was like, well, no, I don't. And I had this block. I just couldn't see it. I was like, no, I couldn't. And then when she brought that up, I was like, well, that's so far. That's so far.
Yeah.
That's way over there. And then she just looked at me very simply and she said, have you ever loved anyone? I was like, yeah. And she said, start there.
Wow.
And I was just like, and I had to go. I went back to my dorm room, and so many of the beliefs and things that I had just started like to unravel. And I realized that in stepping into this character's shoes and walking and trying to tell the truth and just trying to love in that space, I was like, well, there's no there's no distance between myself and this character. There's no distance. And that was the beginning of the dissolution of a lot of shit, right? And I'm also very grateful because now some of my dearest friends are members of the queer community, and and they have taken me under their wing. They have the amount of, I think there's a capacity for love and care that is that it encapsulates like all these different sides, like it's all these different sides of being a human being, because there's a because inherently there's a there's a life that they've had to fight for. There's a life that they've, at least in from what I've seen and what my friends have told me, it's like there's a choice to live in the world, or sometimes or not, but like to exist and to be proud and to be seen wholly and fully, and to not compromise the softness, to not compromise who they are. That is just been so incredibly inspiring.
That was fresh.
And also some of the characters that I played in my career have been gay, you know, and or have existed in the world on the spectrum in some way of sexuality or identity. And the mission and the kind of the honor, the mission, the duty I have as a artist is I just feel it's just so sacred. Like to be able to step into their shoes, and to be able to step into their shoes with the call of existing in their truth wholly, with all of the textures and complexity that I can muster in this instrument. You know, I just, my gratitude is, it's just abounds, you know?
Well,
Yeah.
you've been an ally to the community, so I have to thank you for that. Very much, especially during this Pride Month, we have to appreciate our allies, and you certainly have been there. So thank you for that. I want to talk about the power of art. Not to bring things down, but I think it's so important how art can get us through things. I know you lost your father when you were just stepping into becoming a young man. How did you work through that grief process? And I understand that a lot of expression through art also came from that as well.
Yeah. I felt like I'm, in an odd way, I have this gratitude for, I've learned, or I have this acceptance, this can become kind of a gratitude to my father, even in his passing. Because I think that when he passed away, that was my first experience of, now remember, that this is the first time I experienced grief. And that experience of grief was profound, is profound. And it kind of cut through, it kind of just cut through a lot of stuff. And art for me, whether it's art for me, whether it's a poem by John Donne, or a song, like a gospel song that I would listen to that put me in a certain kind of space, or a movie that I would watch, like Good Will Hunting, where, there's a character where Matt Damon's character is wrestling and trying to really just trying to step into manhood, really trying to take responsibility and be a man, and has someone in his life who's holding him to account, and doesn't let him run from who he is. Or The Lion King, and that sense of remember who you are, Simba, remember who you are. Like, I see echoes of him everywhere. And art has been a balm. It's also been a way of, I think of, that in terms of this raw energy, that it becomes an alchemy. I can use it in different ways. And art is the way that I alchemize like big things. Like it's whether it's a song, there's through songwriting or poetry or uh and even with Simon and Zoey's Extraordinary Playlist, I found that was one of the first times in my life. I think that was in that experience because I hadn't done singing in a long. It'd been years since I sang, and when I auditioned for Zoe's, and I remember a friend Jane who worked on What If with me put my name in the hat, and I read the pilot, and when I read that there is a Black man around my age who lost his dad, immediately I felt like I knew him. And I was like, how often does a character come along that I feel like just lives in me? And then came the moment of, well, what do you sing? And I went through the process of trying to figure out all these different kinds of songs to sing. And it was a musical theater show, but for better or for worse, a lot of times I can be averse, like musical. I can be a little musical theater averse. I have this idea of what it looks like and what it needs to be, and as opposed to doing what I thought someone would want, I leaned into what was true for me, and in doing that, there was a song that I'd been listening to that reminded me of my dad, and so I chose that song to audition with. And that kind of opened the door, right? And as opposed to like leaving my shit at the door when I go into the room and all of this other stuff, I just came in as I was with everything, including him, my pops. And it turns out that, the creator, Austin, of the show, the genesis of Zoe's was his loss of his father. And the kind of singular experience it is to lose a parent, and trying to find connection when the rest of the world kind of goes on and your life is forever changed. It made so much sense. And I find I am a bit of an esoteric in my own way, I will say. If I would even go so far as to say I'm a spiritual person. I believe that there's a lot more than what we can see and a lot more than what we can understand. So I believe that my pops is very much present in a lot of the things that I do. Just as the ancestors are very much present in a lot of the things that I do or the things that I attempt to do. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I lost my mom this past year, so everything that you say just absolutely rings true. Absolutely. I want to go back to the Alliance Theater in Atlanta, Georgia. They've won the regional Tony Award for regional theater. That was your first kind of big professional stage debut, 3-person play, The Whipping Man. What was that experience like? What was the rehearsal process? Do you remember opening night? It being like, we're not in school anymore. We're not studying. Like, now you're in the big leagues.
Oh man, yeah, I was terrified. I was so terrified. I couldn't have been more afraid. But there was a guy, an actor, Keith Randolph Smith, who's just he's a phenomenal actor. He's one of the best actors I've ever seen. He played Simon in the play, and he just had this nurturing father energy, and also this sense of play and a sense of like genuine curiosity. I thought that coming out of school and booking The Whipping Man, I thought that somehow I had to have answers. But when I watched him in the room working, it seemed like the thing that he had a bevy of was questions. he didn't take anything for granted. He would ask questions about everything. And he said in the beginning of the rehearsal process, I'll never forget, he said, I ask a lot of questions. And some of them are going to sound crazy, but I ask a lot of questions. And he would. There'd be times when he would ask questions and I'd be like, that's right there, bro. Like, the answer's right there. What are you talking about? It's like right there. But I'm looking at this in terms of, equations and figuring it out, and, how the 2 + 2 is 4, and this is this and this and this and this, as opposed to the kind of the soft tissue of building a character, and the soft tissue of like the sinew that creates a world, and the questions that create conversations that then influence the entirety of the world that you live in later. And I don't even know if he put all that language around it, but that was my experience of him. Because some of the questions that he asked, though sometimes you could look into the script and be like, the answers there, the conversations we had were the thing, right? And then in the process of it, our opening night, I remember just I was so stressed because, Atlanta, I believe Atlanta has some of the best actors out there, just incredible talent. And a lot of my contemporaries, it's the way it always goes. Like, there are people that are in the community that have been doing it a long time that also auditioned for the show. And I was like, oh man, they're gonna come to the show and they're gonna think, who's this little motherfucker coming out of school with this role, and what's he gonna do with it? And in this press, and I never had press before, there's never people no one, you're in school, ain't nobody coming to review you. Like, who gives a fuck? Like,
your parents say, good job.
Yeah, they're like, you did it.
Yeah.
Now go to class, like,
Yeah.
go to theater practice or build something, So I was just like, it was all of those things. And we did the opening night show. And I remember the opening night show was fine. It wasn't the best. And I was in my head about it when we went to go see everyone. And there was this actor, his name's Iraj. And he was one of the old heads in Atlanta. He kind of pulled me aside, and I was a little pensive, I'll say. And he was just like, well, he's like, now the show is yours. I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, opening night is wonderful. It's an incredible thing. You realize that, like, he was in his own way in that moment teaching me that opening night, though wonderful and all of these things, that is for them. It's like for them, for the community, for theater, for the press, for the people and all of that stuff. Once you get past that threshold, then it's yours and you get to do it every single day. You get to live in it every single day. Then it's in your hands. Then it's like, how's it gonna deepen? How's it gonna grow? The conversation that you have with your fellow actors, with the audiences every night, it evolves. And that excited me in this whole different kind of way, the potential of that. Because I hadn't really experienced that before. Because once again, you're doing shows in school, you do like 5 performances,
Yep.
doing a run of the thing, right? You don't even get a chance to really get your sea legs on it before you're done. And so that was also a phenomenal experience. The Whipping Man was so affirming for me. And it really solidified the Alliance as like a theater home. The community there, Jody Feldman, the casting director there, was the one who saw me I was assistant teaching this Collision youth theater workshop because one of the assistant teachers last minute dropped out and they needed someone to just be there. So I went and said I'd assistant teach, which just meant really talking to 13 and 14-year-olds every once in a while and, try not to look dumb, but everything you do looks dumb to them. So
Right.
you're just kind of holding space and being made fun of. And, but we did in that Collision project, the teacher, Brian Mercer, he's taking our town and making it a musical. So we took our town and made it a musical to 1950s music was the goal. So we started doing that, and it was interesting and quirky and fun. But there's this character named Simon Stimson in our town, this really dark, brooding character with a lot of stuff. And Brian was trying to figure out, he said, which of the students is going to play this role? And he just looks over to this assistant teacher who's, just being made fun of here and there and kind of just taking up space. And he's like, hey, you're going to play Simon. He's like, I'm not 14. Why would I do that? Why would I do that? But sure enough, I end up playing Simon, and Jody comes to the reading, the presentation, and she's like, who's that guy? And she pulls me aside and asks me what my plan is, asks me about myself. And at the time I was still in school. And she kept me in mind. And she started calling me in for readings and workshops. And then when not randomly, a brilliant actor, his name is Bernard, he booked a movie when he was supposed to do A Christmas Carol at the Alliance. He booked a movie right before they went into tech. She called me and she said, hey, would you like to take over his role in Christmas Carol? We're about to go into tech, so you have to learn his track. And I was like, what's the track? What's the track? What's the role? I have to do what? Yeah, sure. Okay. I needed a job at the time, to be frank. So I did it. And that opened the door to The Whipping Man and auditioned for that. So yeah.
That was fresh.
We know you had success. Lucas Cage, What If, Zoey's extraordinary playlist, of course. What was it like with the success of Zoey's? Because we had seen you on TV, but once Zoey's hit, like that changed like the whole culture of what a TV show should look like, what a cast should look like. The diversity in that cast is phenomenal, especially for that time. It kind of set fire to a lot of network shows that were like, oh, now we can tell these stories. Now these characters can be leads. Now these characters, non-binary characters, can also have a voice as well. What was it like having that kind of recognition and all that attention around this show? Telling that boy who started at Alliance and the Whipping Man, now you have this like everybody knew you.
Yeah, it was a little surreal because we came out in the middle of COVID in the beginning. And so it felt oddly isolated in this interesting way. Like it seemed like this show caught fire and became this balm and this harbinger of kind of joy to so many people that were going through this dark time in this really big way. And yet the whole cast was on Zooms. Yeah. And we're talking to each other on Zoom for the first time and remembering the thing that we did and what we felt when we did it. And we felt like we had something really, really special. Felt like as we were in the making of it, there was just this sense that there was just this sense that we were making something that we could be proud of. And I think it can sound a little, odd to be like, we're doing something that's never been done before. All that shit. But the fact of the matter is, I'd never experienced anything like it. And it seemed to me to be the heart of what musical theater is in its conceit. And the fact that these characters existed in the world meant that we'd be able to know them in a certain kind of way because of the framework of the show in a way that I just hadn't experienced before. Then on top of that, Austin was just relentless in his pursuit of the truth and in a way really inviting conversation and the cast into the space in an effort to really seek out that, to amplify it, to create space for it. And I mean, it was a joy. And to go from, being at the Alliance, doing with Whipping Man, to being on Zoey's Extraordinary Playlist, playing Simon, I was like, pinch me, is this my life? Like, when did this happen? Not to mention, part of me was like, a musical? really? It's gonna be like, that's it? That's gonna be the thing that really shakes shit up? That's crazy. Because at the time I was still like wrestling with this idea of whether or not I should be in the room. Because it felt like there were some heavy hitters in that fucking show, man. And people with resumes, as big as this wall.
Yeah.
And people who I respect a lot and look up to, whose work I've known. And to be in the room with them, and to trust that the thing that is in me belongs there was a journey through that process. And but I'll also say that one of the trends in my artistic life and in my life is that usually I end up in spaces doing something that I haven't done before. Usually it requires more of me than I ever thought it would, or that I could bring. And there's always a fucking deadline. So there's a sink or swim type situation to it. And in that crucible is where I learn a lot about myself, a lot about my instrument, I learn a lot from the people around me. It also kind of cracks the ego part of things, because it makes me porous. Like I don't find value in going into a space assuming that I'm the smartest one in the room. Probably not. Assuming like, because I like to think of it like the Power Rangers. Like everybody's got a thing, the Triceratops and the rhinoceros and whatever the fuck, and you put it all together and it's a thing. I do what I do, and I respect what that person does, because my body, I can't do that. And in my wildest dreams, I wouldn't be able to do that, So I get to sit back, and in that show, I could sit back and watch someone shine in a way that just being in that proximity to like Alex Newell, being in proximity to Alex, watching Alex like just be Alex in the world. Yeah. Take up space, like offer decisive artistic choice to moments, understanding, because also like understanding that it doesn't live in this bubble. There's something about working on a TV show like that and understanding that the power of really devoting yourself to getting it right. Like it's not a benign thing. Like it's not, a story told without care is a violent story. Like it's violent and it will affect people and hurt people. But a story that's told with care, like that is a healing story. Whether it's, in whether it's all hunky-dory, roses and sunshine, or whether it goes to the depths of the darkness and all of these things. And that like intention in the making of it. I think that's part of the reason why it resonated in the way that it did, because so many people were able to see themselves, because of that desire to tell the truth. Folks would turn on the show and they'd see someone who didn't look like them, but was them.
Yeah.
And it just dissolved these ideas of, like you said, who should be a lead, who could be a lead, who's someone we should listen to, the assumptions of what that person's inner world is like, assuming that we understand that someone that is, I remembering right now, Alex singing The Great Pretender. And this is someone that's so powerful and strong, takes up so much space, being able to articulate, that space of not knowing, and of not knowing, of trying to figure it out, of kind of almost a fake it till you make it, which if there's not a space like that, then we kind of forget that there's echoes of us in everybody, that we're all just a lot more alike than we think, Yeah.
Well, along those lines, we have to talk about your performance in P Valley, Big Teak. You're in 5 of the 10 episodes, but your storyline fills that whole season. I just have to tell you. I have not had the benefit of seeing you on stage. I have to tell you, from the minute your entrance, and they don't give you time, by the way, to work through your character. It's like your character's boom, tell your story in such a big way. Even from your entrance, your character was so grounded in every movement, every glance, there was just this energy and this smoldering chemistry that just leapt off the screen. And your character, for those viewers, like, you have to watch it. Your character is dealing with so many issues, such as sexual identity, trauma, rising above the culture that he thinks he has to subscribe to. All of these issues are going in such a short time as an actor with your character. And you do so much, like I said, even with your looks, filled in a lot of the storyline. It wasn't just the script. It was such a shock for me to see you going from Zoey's to this kind of character. It was such a different world. When I say, like, you're an acting chameleon, you encapsulated this character in such a real way. I believed you from the minute you stepped on. So much so that I became such a part of the story, and of course, it has a very, very dark end to it. As an actor, and I know you also going back and forth. You were doing the Christmas movie of Zoey, which is like, how do you go from like candy canes and singing to Big Teak? As an actor, where did you even start that creative process, knowing you had a short time to tell this huge story with all of these different layers that we see?
I think that, one, thank you. And just thank you. Alexander, thank you. This has been beautiful thus far. Your questions are just so thoughtful and thorough. And so I just want to say thank you.
Well, I'm such a fan. And like I said, your artistry just is very inspirational.
Thank you. I appreciate that. When it comes to Teak and P Valley, so much of that for me, that's Katori. I have having the good fortune of being inside of that world, because when I read that audition, those sides, it was like the feeling that I got was, it was like, I have to honor him. It was like, I felt like there was a part of him that I got. He reminded me of friends that I've known. He reminded me of so many people. And I remember in the callback with Katori, her talking about what his function was, what she wanted for him, and that it was finite. And so it was very clear from the audition process that his arc was finite, and that her hope and that her desire was for his presence to be felt in a certain kind of way. And so she wanted someone that she could trust with him. And I felt an immense responsibility to him. And because there's no time, like you said, there's no time, there's no buildup. There is this work ahead of time, which is be it on dialect or the conversations that Katori and I would have about him and his upbringing and where he's from, because Katori is very, very, very thorough in her crafting of the world. And the kind of the socioeconomic specific space that she puts how she puts a character into the space. And so she was very explicit about those things, also leaving room for, my creative input here and there. And there were images and pictures and things that came to mind that some of them became part of the tattoos that he wore, that adorned his body. But there was a sense that I had very quickly that he had to come in to the world clear and decisive. And so I tried my best to do that, to come into the world with that kind of clarity. And it helped immensely that my scene partner for the majority of the season was Jay Alphonse, who's just an incredible actor and a very generous actor, and one who we saw each other around in New York back in the day. And so when I knew that he was the guy that I was going to be acting opposite, there's also this sense of, you have to, you got to show the fuck up, man. You just have to show up. You can't hide. And I also had the good fortune of, there is there's some techniques that I would play with and work with here and there. Some sensory work that I worked with this teacher named Megan McGarry, working on some sensory things in terms of trying to establish a subconscious life, the stuff that just lives just the stuff that's always cooking beneath the surface.
That was fresh.
And when you're looking at a character who he's lived such a life before the moment you meet him, the thing that has to be solid, in my opinion, is everything that he's lived through. That has to be in his bones. That has to be, because you can't, in my opinion, it would be challenging to try to act it, like to try to put it on. It has to, and also for one of the things that I loved about Teak is just the juxtaposition of him. There was so much light and darkness. And so being able to not play the end, to being able to really lean, because also I knew what the end was going to be. And so part of the exploration and the mission was, how do I go all the way here in joy? Because the people that I know who have had ends like him, no one around them would know. Most of the people in their lives, no one would know. A lot of the conversation is, I would have never seen, I thought he was so happy. I thought he was the rock for everyone. He protected everybody. He did this, and this. So if I can go all the way there, knowing what the end is going to be, then that's just, it just felt more honest.
I have to tell you, one of the chilling scenes was when Murda brings in the new car and he's sitting in the driver's seat, Teak, and he starts getting emotional and crying. It's like he doesn't deserve this happiness. And there was that tug of war we saw there was no script. It was, the camera was just on you. And we saw you so beautifully present that struggle as to, yes, it's okay to be happy, but there's this darkness and we feel bad for being happy, or that we don't deserve it, or that we can't overcome the darkness to live in that happiness. And you encapsulated that all in those few frames there. I have to tell you, it was chilling. I saw it all right there. It was beautifully done.
Thank you.
So a role like Teak, and then in Jelly's Last Jam, we think Jelly's Last Jam is this big jazz fun, and it is that. We're celebrating the music of Jelly Roll Morton, but we're also talking about his experience as a black man back in that era. Then we have a character like Teak here that's trying to struggle to be a black man in current day era. You yourself, you've been raised in entertainment and you're making your voice heard as a black man. How do all three of those elements come together when we look at the past, we look at culture in P Valley, and then we look at your life and your culture and how you grew up and what you've accomplished? How do those narratives give us a vision of what the Black experience is today?
It's a great question. I think the thing that resonates with me, or the thing that comes up to me, is like the spaces that these men have lived in at some point in their lives, whether it's Jelly and him as a child. Because he becomes so many different things, but he is, in my opinion, he is filling a gaping void throughout the majority of his life. And that void existed in that space, in that childhood space.
Cool.
And it's because in that childhood space there was in those relationships there was no room for who he was. And because there was no room for who he was, he became something else and started finding things, people, accolades, whatever, to fit inside of it. And whereas with Jelly, it was fame and fortune, and he had this incredible gift, this savant gift that opened doors in ways that people would only dream. He kind of climbs to the height of a mountain, only to realize that the vacuum inside of him still exists.
Yeah.
And then with Teague, there's that hole in childhood through that violence that he experienced and the loss of his siblings and not being able to protect them. And in reaction to that, to feeling powerless, making himself powerful, like being proficient in the law of violence and in the rules of violence, and being able to, apply violence in the world in a way that he couldn't before, and trying to atone for what he was the people he was incapable of protecting. Like, I think that there are these men who, the question that comes to mind is like, do I fit? Like, do I fit in this world? This world that's built, was it made with me in mind? Was it made for me? And these men, in their own ways, either had parts of themselves amputated or amputated parts of themselves, and the parts that they cut off, they never really found again.
Yeah.
And the cost of, and I think healing is the process of like reclaiming those parts of ourselves. The cost of not reclaiming those parts of ourselves, it brings ends that are, it can bring certain kinds of ends. I think that happens in time with Teague. I think that happened in the past with Jelly. And I think as far as myself, I've experienced, pains, darkness. I'm no stranger to, those dark nights of the soul. Like those are not, like they're not distant to me, right? And also in childhood, there are, whether it's the loss of my father or other experiences in childhood that like have created wounds that I've moved and acted from. And people that I've hurt along the way, right? The benefit for me in these characters, I think acting for me it's very much a service, and in some ways it's very selfish, because in stepping into someone else's shoes and living through their experience, I inevitably find always, parts of myself. And when I step into a character it's sometimes inside of those shoes that I reclaim parts of myself. I find parts of myself that I gave away that I'm like, oh wow. The parts of myself that like in Simon, this reluctance to experience relationship and joy, kind of being defined by through seasons of, if you ask me anything about myself within 3 minutes, I'd tell you my dad passed away. Like it was like the thing that I would lead with. It was the most identifying part of my personality in my entire life. And I think that in some ways it was like, I don't want to have to broach this at some other point. But I think in other ways it was a protective mechanism for myself as well. There was fear. There was kind of a sense of, hey, don't get too close. I got shit going on. Yeah. Like that kind of thing. And whether it's living inside of Teek's shoes for a while, and that heaviness that also reminds me of my pops. This sense of when something really, really beautiful happens, there is inevitably a pain on the other side. There's the most amazing thing can happen, and I can it's like clockwork. I know it's coming. Yeah. And the sense that there's the part of me that sabotaged and got in the way and didn't want beautiful things and didn't want to experience joy and didn't want to really be happy, because I knew that I wouldn't be able to share that in the way that I wanted. And being able to move through elements of that with him to his end, and experience this reality where I never believed that I am worthy of joy, where I never believed that I am worthy of love, where I never believed that I am worthy of existing fully in my wholeness in any space. And then experience that in my instrument and to go like, oh man, I don't choose that. I don't choose that. John doesn't choose that. And what other professions do we get to live an entire life and then go, oh yeah, I learned a few things there, but that won't be the life that I create for myself. Thank you so much. Thank you. And then even with Jelly, it's very interesting, because his story is as profound and as incredible it is. In some ways, it's not necessarily unique. Like there's no shortage of people in not necessarily in, I'll say his gift is incredibly unique, but in different spaces, whether it's, if it's a poet or an author or a director or a tech genius or whatever, who somehow find their sense of validation and sense of personhood and sense of worth in that, and try to fill themselves up with that as a substitute for being known, as a substitute for being seen, really seen, and getting to that point where they move away from the people that see them, because they'd much rather be around people who only admire them. Like, that's I think that's almost that's Sisyphean. That's a tale as old as time. Like, you know, because it is a certain kind of it's a certain kind of vulnerability to be with people who really see you and really know you and um and really stand for who you are at your core in a world where, I think about the world we live in now where often we have our, I mean, we present ourselves and we always present ourselves, but it feels like we hyper present ourselves. It's a product of the world we're in, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like if I am substituting being seen for being like double click liked, then what's the end? What's the and what's the cost? And do I lose the ability then to like stand in space with someone else and be seen, for the good and the bad, So like it's all of those things, I think. Because when you asked me that question, which was an incredible question, those are the different thoughts and stuff that come to mind.
And this is what brings such a beauty to your art and all the different layers that we see. Southern Californians flocked to come see Jelly's Last Jam. It plays until June 23rd. Go to PasadenaPlayhouse.org. John, I can't thank you enough for spending time. I know you have a show tonight. You have so many other things that you need to be preparing for and thinking about. Thank you for being so reflective and sharing so much of your art and your life with us. What a great chat. Where do you want people to find and follow you?
You can find me on Instagram at JStewIII. That's Instagram. That's Instagram. And then on Twitter at Stewart_III on Twitter. And those are the places to find me. Yeah.
And hopefully there's another 54 Below show coming, I hope.
I'm telling you, I'm trying to do that, an iteration of that out here.
Good.
I would love that.
Yes, please do. Thank you again for spending so much time with us. I really appreciate it. And I'm a big fan.
Thank you so much for this time.
Thank you. And happy Pride Month. Again, thank you for being such a great ally.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
All right. Thank you, John. He's got a show tonight. That's all, folks. It's always a grab bag of fun here every week on the Rocks. Big thank you to our engineer, Tony Sweet, our social media clip editor, Alexis Mendez. Coming up, we have American Idol's David Hernandez, author and producer of AMC's Interview with the Vampire, Christopher Rice, and one of my favorite actresses, Sheree Agdouchlu. She's coming in studio. Please like, share, subscribe so we continue bringing this fabulous programming coming your way. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, stay sexy, and if you drink, stay tipsy. We'll see you next week.
This has been another episode of On the Rocks. Tweet me and slide into my DMs on Twitter and Instagram at On the Rocks On Air. Find everything On the Rocks for free at OnTheRocksRadioshow.com. Subscribe, like, review, and share. Until next week, stay fabulous.